when I spoke with Manav and Aniruddha, we said that what are you going to do? Uh, if I would like to come and talk to you guys about storytelling, or basically talking about the fact that some people do have stage frights, and they try to figure out what to do. And I said, like, look, let me take a look at your website to get an idea about what you guys really do. So I looked at it and I realized that there were some cases where people came and gave a presentation. They told you some story, something that they were interested in. They talked about it. Hey, good this thing. I have no issues. A lot of people I know, Sukumar, for example, I've seen his presentation. And in some cases, people came and talked about how you should prepare yourself for telling stories. How do you get rid of your stage fright, and how do you become a good storyteller? Now, I don't claim to be a great storyteller per se, but what happens is that over a period, one did some good presentations, and you can make out, right? After the presentation is done, you can make out you did good or not. You can be true to yourself. Whether people clapped or not is a different thing. You can be true to yourself. So you know. So I realized that if I decide to tell my story about maybe three major parts of my career as such, but correlate that with uh, stuff about telling stories, stuff about making presentations, stuff about interaction with people, verbal or written, either way. Okay, it might give some ideas to people as to how they can prepare themselves for doing presentations and things like that. So I have picked three areas of my career, and that's why I gave the background first as to what my career was. And I'll try to see in each of them what were my challenges about presentation and things of that kind, or interaction in general, and then go into what did I do properly. It worked or not is up to you guys to decide. Okay, but I'll give you an idea about what did I do. So we go back to some, the time when I'm in school. So obviously a Marathi speaking person. Go to college. It's obviously the papers and everything is in English. Medium of instruction is English. But when you meet your prof, you talk to him in Marathi. Your friends, you talk to them in Marathi. You write your answers in a very bookish kind of a way. There is no need for any presentations in colleges at that time. I'm talking about late 70s. So there's no need for making too many presentations either. So there is no need for talking to anybody really in English. Okay, so that's the background. And then you land up in what? You land up in IIM Ahmedabad, where people have come from different places. They speak English on a day-to-day basis. Some of them have come, probably the lineage is very different. Some are from IITs, some are from St. Stephen's in Delhi. Then you have people, girls coming from Lady Shri Ram. You have people coming from Mayo. There's different backgrounds. So suddenly you get thrown into this bunch, and you start living in that dorm with all the other 20 people. And you can't answer some simple things, like somebody asks you, you want to come for grub? And you don't know what the hell is they talking about. Going for grub, what does that mean? Maybe today's generation is used to that lingo, from earlier times. But in our case, somebody coming from a totally Marathi speaking schools as such, it was very different. If somebody asks, how many sirs are there in your class? I was wondering, what are they talking about? Because the plural of Sardarji is sirs. This I had not thought about. So these are simple things. And what it creates is that it creates the feeling in you that you don't want to talk. In class, your participation is minimal. Your participation is only when the prof picks on you and says, okay, Mr. Hardikar, what do you want to say about this marketing strategy? Then you talk. But other than that, you try to keep to yourself. Okay? And I had realized that's what was happening to me. And then I also realized that it would be a problem in the long run when I'm working somewhere and things of that kind. And then one particular professor we had called Pulin Garg, and Pulin listened to all my story as to what I was, and then in Ahmedabad, what problems I was facing. And he said to me, he said, Pradeep, you have to realize that you need to put yourself into situations that you are not comfortable with, because that is the only way you're going to learn. Prepare a little bit for them, but try to throw yourself into situations which are not your comfort spot, because that will give you more and more confidence of dealing with this. So this is the first sane advice I got in terms of what do you need to do to become someone who can talk, make presentations, and do things. What helped also was in the second year we had a course called Managerial Oral Communication. It was run by one professor. Uh, he was very, very what do you call? He was very enthusiastic about doing things. So he just took about 20 students. They were chosen by lots. Luckily, I got 20 students, and the course was like this. They were going to teach you how do you communicate, managerial oral communication, either in presentations or if you're sitting in a meeting, how do you basically participate in the meeting? How do you do one-on-one interviews, kind of a thing? You are getting interviewed or you are interviewing somebody. What do you do? So they basically talked about facets which are going to help me in my actual career, because those are the things I'll be making. Those are the things I'll be doing. And that course had that. So I said, okay, hey, great. This course will help me. So the first thing they did, and I'm talking about 1980, 81, okay? First thing they did was they told us, you pick a topic that you're comfortable with and do a 5 to 10 minute presentation. Do whichever way you want, whatever you want to use. Pick a topic. We are not telling you to speak on a particular subject. Just pick a topic and just talk. And what they did was they were going to videotape. In those days, 81, they were going to videotape it. Obviously, those big, big camcorders that they used to have with VHS cassettes at that time. They would tape it, and then they were going to basically analyze it in front of everyone. All your peers sitting with you, analyzing your video, your presentation, you analyzing their presentation, and then the prof giving his input. But he said, take something you find interesting, you find people will be, people would like to listen to, okay? Do whatever you want. So obviously the question came up as to what do I talk about? What can I make? What kind of a presentation I can make that this diverse group of students who are sitting there will find it interesting, and at the same time, so okay, this is the story. So sometime around that time, in 1981, around 80-81 time, one of the magazines which is pretty popular among a lot of men, I would say, uh, had completed 25 years in the industry, and they had come out with a special issue, the 25th anniversary issue, in which they had talked about their philosophy behind or their marketing strategy and why they did it and all those things. So I said, okay, so I will take that and I will make a presentation of the success story of Playboy magazine. Okay, so I picked the topic. There were articles about it in various magazines. I read the articles and okay, what was the market need? This, that. Came up with a 5 minute talk. It was all like those days we didn't have slides, so we used to make those transparencies, right? So we would make those transparencies to show. I was talking to a friend of mine who was in the next room, and we said, let's come up with something which right from the beginning people will feel like, oh, suddenly they will get surprised and they will feel interested in listening to what I'm going to talk about. And so we took the cover page of the 20th anniversary issue, and we made he helped me make a slide out of it. He was a good artist. Today he runs Reliance's biotech industry. Okay, but he was a very good artist. So he helped me create a slide which was very innovative. I'll just show you how it looked. Okay? I don't know how many people will be able to see. This is how it looked. This was the slide. A complete black transparency with a white bunny in the middle. The moment I put it up and I waited for 10, 15 seconds for just looking at what people's reaction was. Because then they understood what my topic was. It was a success story of Playboy magazine. Yes, we talked, and very frankly, this was a PG-13 presentation, so, don't be so this thing. We were not that shameless that we would talk about the magazine so openly. So we did discuss, but we talked about the real marketing strategy that they use to market this magazine. 5-10 minute presentation. I think I was able to make people listen to each and every word that I presented. And that is when I realized that the first thing about it, for any presentation, the most important thing is the person in front of you needs to feel interested in what you're going to say. If he doesn't, or if he knows what you're going to say, you have lost him. You need to be, so whenever you are making a presentation, that's the first thing I always remember. What can I say, or how can I say something which will make that person sitting in front of me really interested in what I'm going to say? So obviously they did this, then they took that presentation, everyone discussed it, saying what was wrong. They gave me some existing ideas, like, you should be looking at all the people sitting, so you're not looking at only client who is sitting on the right side, but there are people on the left side also. You should be looking at both of them. These kind of presentations, tidbits they told me. But the main thing that I probably picked from that was this: it has to be an interesting thing that you want to talk about. Then only the other person is going to feel, listening to you. So whether you are making a presentation to your students, whether you are making a presentations to your group employees, or whether you are making a presentation to your company's CEO, the board, or a client, same rule applies. This is something that I picked up at that time. Maybe I picked it up subconsciously, but later on when I sit down and think about it, I realize that is what I picked up at that time, and I started using. Then they also put us into various other situations where we were able to participate in meetings and basically be on some kind of a board, discuss. Do you listen to what people are saying, or you, as soon as you make your point, you go back to your BlackBerry and start checking the messages coming on it. Those kind of things. The metaverbal clues that you give to other people, those become very important in a group of that kind, which is discussing something important from the company perspective. So those things one started picking up. After about 2 months of this course, they allowed us to make the last presentation, and then they showed us both the presentation and showed us what the difference was. And there was a tremendous difference in the way we presented. Okay. After that, for a lot of courses that we did, the projects we did, I was able to get in front of the class and make those presentations to 100+ students. Okay. For someone who had come with a background of different kind, was very, very reluctant or sometimes afraid of standing in front of people and making presentations, to get to a stage where he makes a presentation and one of the girl in the class sends him a note afterwards saying, "Hurrah for managerial oral communication. You did pretty well today." I said, okay, I think I did something good. So my suggestion is two things. One is about this putting yourself into situations which may not be comfortable, preparing for them, thinking about how you can make it interesting for the other person so that he doesn't feel completely lost right in the beginning. This is applicable to a 5-minute presentation or a 1-minute 70 sliders talks that we give in colleges. I have given those also. To keep somebody interested till you finish your 60th slide is a real stretch. But one is able to do that if you keep these things in mind. There are some other things about it which, when we come to that, I'll talk about. But coming out of a business school, this is what I came into industry with. This kind of a background about presentations and in general group interactions. So this is the first stage. If you want, I can, if there are some questions very specific to this, we can take them now or we'll go, further. So open to you guys.
Hey Pradeep, this is Farhan. First of all, I like your jacket. It's awesome. um, yeah, I like the hat behind as well. So very nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I have a question around, and just this is out of curiosity. The first video and the last video, I'm just curious, like, what was the key difference that you found? Was it the difference between difference in the body language? What was it the difference between in the content-wise? What was that key difference that you found?
Content-wise, I think both were equally interesting, I would say. The first one was more individualistic. The last presentation that I made was basically like, the business schools are used to this pre-placement talk by various companies who come for recruitment. So before they actually interview you, they come and make these presentations about how good they are and why you should join them. So we made a presentation like that as if three of us were from Hindustan Levers. And we made a presentation about Hindustan Levers to people. So obviously picked some of the things from my original this thing. So it started with that Hindustan Levers green leaf, to get people into that mode of listening to this thing and talking about we at Levers, what we do kind of stuff. The big difference I saw was this. One, I was able to make the content that I was putting up on slides, okay, I was able to minimize it. Okay. My first one probably I put so much verbiage on the slide that sometimes people would get lost. Either they would be reading that or they would be looking at me and listening to me. Whereas when I made the second presentation, I had very few things on that, which as soon as I put up the slide, people read it in 10 seconds. But after that, they're listening to me. I think that was a major difference between my first presentation and last. Then obviously all the other feedback which had come about look at everybody in the room and you should be able to say it. That happens. Those are standard things which come. The best thing I think I learned was that your content should be not too many things on the slide, because then you lose people. People start reading those and you're lost them. In my career, I have seen tech which are like which are full of images, words, so much, and there are reasons for that. We'll get into that later. But I think those two were the major differences. Okay, so this was the first part, which is like just 2-3 years in the school, and then you come join a big firm. Uh, Surprisingly, I'm joining it as a software developer. We don't do too many presentations in those days. We are basically into programming and coding and systems analysis, design. The only time you make presentations or you interact with people is when you go to implement systems. So I went to Kuwait to implement a system. Now, this is another stretch, right? You have people who, who speak a different language. The English may not be as good as the way we speak. And sometimes at the end of those 15 months, I came back with English, which I wasn't really proud of probably, because you have to break it into like 2-3 words, sentences. Yeah, that's what, when you're implementing a system, you're talking to people who are there in the field working in factories, managers over there. So that's one thing. But yeah, it was fun. I think from the perspective of communication, either verbal or managerial, one part of my TCS career helped me a lot was I came to US and we were developing a PC package in 1985. So IBM PC had just come about a few years before that. You were talking about PC DOS or MS DOS. You had either a black and white monitor or some one color monitor. You had basically floppy disks. There were no hard disks. You're talking about that environment, developing a PC package, which from concept to a floppy that you can buy in 7 months. We did that. Okay. But the project was really interesting. I don't know how many of you are familiar of some kind of particular style of writing business documents called pyramid principle. So pyramid principle is something that a lady called Barbara Minto, she developed when she was working initially at PepsiCo. She had realized that whenever she wrote some document and gave it, or whenever her boss wrote a document and she circulated it, people could not even understand what he was trying to say. So she came up with a method of how do you write a good business document. And it's called pyramid principle because it develops like a pyramid. So it starts with very simple thing, situation. What is the situation? Generally things work like this. Then you come up with something called as a complication, which means something has changed and now things are not working the way you want them to work. That's a complication. Complication raises a question in reader's mind. It is called as a main question. And your idea of writing that document is to answer that question. This is the basic principle of, basic part of pyramid principle. This is where it starts. So you are answering that basic question that the person has in his mind. And now since you are answering that question which automatically came in mind, he is interested in reading what you are writing. The same concept holds for your presentation. The other person should feel interested in listening to you. Here the person should be interested in reading your document. And the way you write after that is, you keep it very concise. You cannot have every question that is there, you answer it either inductively or deductively. Those are two methods there. So either you give a list of things or you give this, and that's why this kind of a explanation. So it's either inductive or deductive logic. But you don't put more than 5 things on under that. So see, now you have minimized the content that you're putting out on each. Now those 5 things which you put, each one of them can raise a question in the reader's mind. Now you're going to the next level. You answer that question. If you write a document like that, when the person reads it, he would have understood everything that you wrote. What you wanted to tell him, I think you are able to do about 90% of this job very easily if you write a document like this. This is what Barbara proposed. We created a PC package which implemented that. And very frankly, even till today, when I write a business document, I always write it in that way. Every document that I have written since 1985 has been like that. So you have to, this is a method I think which even McKinsey took and made it as a practice that they use in-house of how do you write documents. Obviously, they must have made some modifications, but that was the main principle behind it. So that is what gives you an idea about how do you make people interested in what you are trying to tell them, and how you make them listen to your story, or how do you make them read your story. And those are the 2 things I picked up probably during my stay within TCS. I was there for about 6 years, and then after that I went to US and I started working with Bell Labs over there. And that's the second part, or rather the third part, which I'll talk about. So any questions at this point, or shall we go ahead? Fine? Okay. So the third
portion. I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So Barbara Minto's pyramid concept has been around for a long time now, that you also mentioned in 1980s and so on.
Yeah.
Don't you think with the millennials rising to the executive levels, is that changing? Because the attention span is changing and people want more things upfront rather than later on down the line. So is that messaging changing in some way or the other as you experienced it?
I have 2 millennials as my daughters. I have seen them present, and what I feel is this: maybe the way they will put across things has slightly changed, but not tremendously. Those things probably still apply. When I hear them talk about when they tell stories, I see them doing similar manner. Now, the the technology that they may use for that would be different. There's no doubt. And in fact, the kind of course that I talked about today, I think it will be very easy for you people to find someone who can give you coaching of that kind by recording your this thing. You can record it yourself. But see, when you record it, you need to show it to people who understand this stuff. So doing that course that I did, I think it will be very easy for most of the people to do it today. They just have to have that initiative to do it. In terms of making presentations, I don't think it has changed because I kind of got out of Cognizant in 2016. I don't think I made presentations in any different way. So that is one thing that I have seen, that it really didn't change so much. The way some of the millennials make presentations today, I really feel, some of them are really good, the way they talk. But in a lot of times, I kind of, not because of my age, but because of the way the person is telling me a story, I get put off because I don't find it interesting at certain point onwards. Now, it is not a question of what language they use and what setup in which they are making these presentations, but that is what my experience has been. So maybe some changes will take place in the way you communicate, but not very differently.
Awesome. Thank you.
But that's a personal opinion. Okay. So let's move on to something later. So AT&T, I was working at Bell Labs, and Bell Labs, as I think a lot of people who probably are aware of what Bell Labs was, because it became Lucent and everything afterwards. Bell Labs, if you ask me, probably had highest density of PhDs working in a company. So like you are going for breakfast in the morning, and by mistake while you're walking you hit someone. Good probability that that guy is already a PhD. That's how that place was. Okay. You used so typical techies, they would understand the system pretty well. At the same time, you can't say that they can get in front of a client and make that presentation. I have seen that myself. Very few people from labs were able to really do that well. Of course, there are exceptions and there are a lot of good people there, no doubt. But that is what I had seen. We used to work on a system, and nowadays those things have probably gone out of fashion. But those were the days when they had something called as a telemarketing systems, which used to call people's either work number or home number, typically when you're having dinner, and disturb you and ask you, do you want to buy a new insurance policy or things of that kind. When we started doing this, first customer that we had was American Express, which used to use this for making calls to people who haven't paid their bills. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Having normal card, green one, or the gold card, or the platinum card. You have a platinum card, but you haven't paid. So hey, let's call Larry Bird and ask him why he hasn't paid. These are the kind of things which used to happen. So they're using these systems, very complicated systems. And AT&T had a sell side, which probably was used to just selling boxes. So you're selling some T1 lines, communication lines. You're selling some cluster controllers. That time AT&T used to sell some computers also. So you're selling those computers. You're selling voice switches like Definity and Galaxy kind of a thing. They were not used to selling systems. And this was a complicated system. And today, just because I wanted to talk to you guys about it, I just did some search on that. It's very difficult to find things from 1987. But this system was so complicated that AT&T patented it. So this is there in US patents as to how this system should work. And what this system used to do typically is, see, the common problem in those cases used to be agents calling up a person, his phone number. That phone number normally that call would result into 3-4 kind of thing. One, that number has been disconnected. Anyone who owes American Express thousands of dollars, typically changes his phone number. So you can't get him. You call his number, that phone is disconnected. Okay? Or it has changed. You will get that recording. This number has been changed to so and so. That is one result. But you won't get the guy. Second result, you will get it will be busy tone. Okay? Third one, it will ring but nobody will answer. Fourth, somebody will answer. These are the four common dispositions of the call. Now, if the agent is doing this, in the first three cases, agent has wasted his time because he hasn't talked to anybody. He's just making calls. Okay. In the fourth one, he could probably talk to somebody, but it could be an answering machine. So again, you have not reached the real person. So you want to increase the agent's productivity in terms of in an 8-hour shift, he should be busy most of the time. What would you do? What would you do is you would make the system make those calls, not the agent. You give a list to the system, it makes all those calls, and whenever they connect to a person or to an answering machine, you give it to an agent. So agent suddenly gets a call saying you are talking to Aniruddha Pore, and it gives some basic information about Aniruddha there. Okay, Aniruddha, I'm just taking your name. You can change it to mine because I'm going to say you owe American Express $1,000, right? So that thing comes, and the guy starts talking, and he says, "Oh, Mr. Aniruddha, yeah. Do you know that you owe us $1,000?" He's buying time. He's spending some time so that the system can go and pick up larger information about Aniruddha, like how many previous payments he has not sent on a proper time and stuff like that, and then show it to him. This is what the system used to do. Now, this itself, the whole process itself is complicated. Now, imagine AT&T salespeople who are selling boxes, used to selling boxes, trying to sell this system to any client. Impossible. So we were given a task of training the salespeople by giving them presentations about this system so that they will be able to go and sell this. Okay. So my job is give a presentation to them and train various sales teams that AT&T has. Now I realized one thing, what was important, and that I have realized I probably carried that throughout my career, is that if you're going to talk about something, you got to know it pretty well. So I knew this system inside out. I was working in test lab in AT&T for almost a year, learning about how this system works before I actually got in front of those sales guys to tell them how to sell this system. And I told them that they need to sell the system not by talking about all the equipment that it has and things like that. You need to tell the client a story. You need to tell the client what's in it for them. Why should they buy this system? That's the first thing you start with. And for such things to happen, you need to always be able to talk to your client and pick up such tidbits from all over the place and make them part of your presentation. So when I went to a client, I said, you know something, American Express uses this system. And they have improved their agent productivity so much that the system they use, which cost them about $1 million, they are able to make more calls and collect money from more people so that they don't have to give it away to some third party to do the collection. And third party keeps 75 cents and gives you 25 cents to a dollar. They don't have to do that. They are making money, and this system paid off in 6 months. Hey, the client immediately said, $1 million system pays off in 6 months, and after that is basically my profit? Yes. That's it. You sold it. Why? Because in your presentation, you made it relevant for that person to buy this system. Now, what AT&T gained in this thing is the flip side of it. That guy made so many calls on AT&T's long distance service that AT&T got so much business out of him that AT&T recovered its cost in 6 months also. They could have given the system free to him, and in 6 months, the number of calls he made, they would have made money. And they would have, it would have paid off. So basically, after 6 months, the client and AT&T both are happy. But unless you tell this story in these kind of ways, client doesn't buy it. And it's really the smallest configuration of this system used to cost almost $1 million. AT&T used the same system to sell something called Universal Card that AT&T came out with in late 87, late 80s. They marketed it using this system. They had, I remember, 256 agents at a time trying to sell this card to people. I have myself implemented that system. So to train those people as to how should they sell this to others, this is what I picked up. That first of all, you don't talk about complexity of system by putting up things like this. You talk about the benefits of it that the customer is going to get. That should be the message that you convey. You can convey that message only if you have picked up these tidbits about how that system is, what are the trade-offs, and you have when you hear something like this from an Amex client, I wrote it down somewhere and used it in the third client presentation I was making. So everywhere I would pick up things like that and use them in my tidbits. So this is where the content that you're putting out to people becomes important. You're putting out a content which is something that people can understand. A layman can understand, a CEO or a CTO can understand. And they're willing to throw in that $1 million to buy the system for you. We did the same thing in Congress while selling a lot of things that we did. I still remember the Euronext we sold. Basically, we took over Euronext project. I remember the time when we sold it to Lloyd's or JPMC. Everywhere, Credit Suisse, everywhere we were able to tell them in simple terms what was the benefit for them. And that is what made the difference. So that is the second part, which I kind of picked up when I was in AT&T. In Schwab, there was not hardly any presentations that we had to make. I was very techie that time, so really didn't do too many of those. Came back, and I think the only place it helped me was when Schwab asked me, when I told them that I was going back to India, they said, "What can we do so that you won't go?" And I said, "Nothing." I said, you can probably give me double the salary, but I'm taking a pay cut when I go there. So double the salary doesn't mean anything to me. So they said, "Why are you going back? And if you're going back, do you think we can do something in India?" I said, "Probably." So I came to India and did a feasibility study, went back, wrote the feasibility study document exactly like what Pyramid Principle taught me, gave it to my CEO over there. He read it and he said, "Pradeep, I always have known you as a technical person. What is the warm fuzzy feel? How can you give me this warm fuzzy feeling that you'll be able to run a company there?" I said, "Yeah. So any techie has ever given you a document like that?" He said, "No." That's it. He said, "Yeah, I understand. Go back and go back to India and start a unit and just do software for us." So I came back and I did all the software development. Entire Schwab Capital's Y2K we did from India. 6 people working in one company. These people used to sit outside in Pune and talk about Nasdaq Stock Exchange and things like that. People around would be surprised. This guy, what are you guys talking about? But so basically, communication probably played a big role in me coming here with that kind of a project opportunity. Now after that, I joined Cognizant. So that's the third part. Any questions for in between portion?
I just have one question here. So, and this is again out of curiosity. So there has been a wave of news that has been circulating, especially from Amazon. Jeff Bezos, CEO, banning PowerPoint presentation and saying that this is arguably the most effective leadership technique that they all have implemented. And the idea is like they wanted to get out of the point where people used to present the standard deck, saying that, "Oh, I didn't prepare my slides, so let me prepare the standard deck and present it." Versus they want to move to a point where they have like a 6-page memorandum that the executives would prepare and then read it, and that makes it more effective versus like exactly the reverse of what the PowerPoint presentation and the pyramid principles were driving. So I'm just curious about what's your thought around that.
I don't know, but one thing that I learned, at least during my time in Cognizant, is that I would never use a deck prepared by somebody else. I would always use my deck. Okay, maybe I was at a position where I was leading a particular unit. So when it came to talking about unit, they had no choice but to give me that flexibility. Okay. So the presentations wise, I used to do it. And some of the things that I learned when I made presentations within Cognizant, and we can probably, it's a good segue to go into that, were very simple. Like, first of all, you need to write your own deck. You are creating it. The second thing that I learned was that uh, you don't put up a slide, then go to the next slide and start reading and giving your thoughts about it. I used to be able to make all my presentations without looking back as to what is there on the slide. Because I have created it myself, I know what it is. And between going from one slide to the next slide, okay, I would have a sentence that is taking me from one slide to next slide and not put up the next slide and then start talking about the content. So these kind of flows always help. Okay. Now, yeah, there will be changes, but I say even today I talk to a lot of people. Predominantly, the presentations are still made this way. Okay. I can say that yes, there will be some guys who will be such good presenters that they will have a totally different style of presenting. Okay, and I'm an ardent admirer of those people, and I watch them. Okay, I watch, let's say, Stephen Jobs coming out and introducing iPhone, small one, talking about his jeans pocket and say, I did not know what this small pocket was used for, and then taking out an iPod from that, right? So that's altogether different. There will be people like that, but you don't require that. You will not be able to do much with that kind of a style on the 70 presentations that you will make in a company on a day-to-day basis or in a year, right? So that is the thing about it. Yeah, there are places where presentations and convincing people of your message can be done in a drastically different way. I completely agree with that. But you know, majority of things, the way they work even now, is quite similar. Even after, like, I have gotten out of Cognizant for the last 4 years, but I have attended several presentations, so many cases with some other companies also. Still, it is same, and still you see differences between people who do it wrongly and who do it correctly. So that is what I have noticed. I think one of the big challenge that when you are in a company of that size, and I'm not picking Cognizant just because I work there. I think it is true for mostly big companies. The biggest problem, what I see is this. Most of the time, one is not really sure what is going to stick. So you throw everything at the client and see what sticks. And then you basically, once he asks you some question about, oh, okay, so you're talking about the cost of doing this thing is this, then this is his interest. And then you talk about it. That analysis actually should be done beforehand, before you put up your deck. Okay. Second problem we always face with companies like that is you don't know who is going to be making the presentation. There is a deck prepared about banking and financial services capabilities. Who is going to make it? Nobody knows. This guy, oh, I'm trying for so and so to come and make the presentation. No, we may have to do it by somebody else. But that somebody else doesn't know this as much, this story. So he's going to read what is there on the slide. So let's put everything on the slide. There goes the first principle, right? Of keeping your content small, because now you have put everything on the slide with the guy standing and reading. That's the second problem you have. Since that guy does not know that story completely, he cannot make it relevant to the client. I always used to find that, certain things which always help in making a good presentation. One was, you start with something which is very, very light-hearted. I used to think about what this client does and pick some kind of an area and come up with some joke around it. Okay. Which is a typical tactic used by a lot of people who do stand-up comedy. First thing is you make something which people suddenly feel, oh, friendly. Okay. I want to listen to this guy. He's my type. Okay. So you come up with something. That's something, I'll give you a very simple example. Obviously, in business scenarios, you can't come up with the jokes that stand-ups will use. but some other leasing situation. We used to meet a lot of banking clients, and I would talk to them about banking regulations which need to be implemented in various systems. Everybody hates it. I would get up there and say, these banking regulations are like Y2K again and again. Because in Y2K, what did you do? Look at the system. You have to make changes for handling the year, date 1st of January 2000. Okay. You made it in all your programs. What do you do for regulation? You study the regulation, make the change. Tomorrow they come up with one more regulation. Again, you study the regulation, make the change. So I used to say, why this is like Y2K again and again. Okay. Now the thing is, none of the clients laughed at this. Okay, and I knew it, but I still would say it, and they would say, "Yeah, you're, no, that's true, but I feel your pain," kind of a thing. That is the kind of a situation. And then I got in front of a organization called FSA, which is a UK's organizations like SEC that you have in US. They have something called FSA. FSA guys had come and I made this joke saying, "Hey, regulations are like Y2K again and again," and everyone laughed because they were the regulators. Okay, but the moment you make that joke and they can, understand you, after that you make a presentation and they are happy listening to you. So that's the way we would start. I wasn't so sure about this, but very recently I was talking to one of my colleagues and I said, "Hey, I've made presentations so far in Cognizant and you saw them also. Can you tell me what are the things that clicked?" I said, "I just want to make a list." So he said, one thing that we always used to love was this, and all clients loved it, that when you started the presentation, you got them on your side by making something which is very relevant to them, a joke about that, light-hearted way, and then you delve into everything else. And he said the second thing we liked was that even though you were talking about very complex system, you tried to make it very, very simple messages. This is where that content and telling a story thing comes in. You cannot show this and convince anyone. You need to tell them in a language that they understand and can appreciate. And that's what I realized. The other thing which helps in a work, if you are working for a big company like that, is this. I joined Cognizant in 2004, which means it was in existence for about 7 years before that. Started in 96, 97. I had missed the entire first 7 years of how it grew. I think everybody who is on this call and is a Cognizant person will know that graph that we show to people going up. How company grew, or sales-wise, revenue-wise. That classic graph that we show. I had missed the first 7 years of that. So I was not able to tell the stories the same way somebody else would. I would tell them what was there of capability of my group and all those things. But about Cognizant, I couldn't. So what I started doing was attend presentations made by other people. The CEO of the company, Lakshmi Narayan. Lakshmi would come as a first person who will talk to the client, make a presentation. I would attend that, even though my presentation is going to come sometime in the afternoon. I will still attend that 9 o'clock presentation that he will make, because he was with Cognizant in those days and he was telling a story of Cognizant without looking at the slides behind and in a language that people there can understand. So you pick up things from that. So when I started making presentations, I told them a story of a young boy who basically was working with Dun and Bradstreet, came to India probably in late 90s, and then decided, looking at things, that they can start a development center in India, software development company. Went back, the company Dun and Bradstreet said to him, "Oh, you think it can be done? Okay, so now join the company. We'll form a company and you do it." And who was the guy? It was Francisco D'Souza, who later on became CEO of Cognizant. This is a story you will pick up only from people who have been in the company at that time. I was it. So I picked it up only because I attended Lakshmi's session and then used it every time when I spoke with clients. So these are the things by which probably even a dreary presentation of 60, 70 slides can be made palatable for your clients. And people don't spend that much attention to do it. I think if you do that, then probably clients pick it up just like that. Sometimes you get thrown into situations where the client is wary of all these presentations because he has listened to Wipro and Infosys, whole day, and then in the evening he's meeting you and he says, "Hey, look, guys, you will show me the same thing. So forget that deck. Let's just sit around the table and talk about your company." Now you got to tell him a story of Cognizant without any slide, and that you then obviously you can't say like this, right? So that is a story that you will be able to. So if you spend time in doing things in this particular manner, when you are sitting around a table with him, you'll be able to tell him the story. And that presentation probably carries a lot more weightage for the client as compared to any other thing that you do. So that's what I probably learned mostly when I was in Cognizant in terms of making presentations, what I should do. So I always kept track of the fact that I have my own, I prepare my own content. I started with this kind of a way. I take the story like this. I should be able to make this presentation without looking at the slides. And the transition from one slide to another happens with a sentence and not just like this and then talking. I think it worked pretty well. That's what I realized over a period. So any thoughts and just things about questions?
Pradeep, this is Ranga here.
Yeah.
Pradeep, I relate to what you said, right? That you should understand the presentation, right? I've seen a lot of people in Cognizant, right? You prepare something, they come just at the nick of the time and then they present it, right? So they actually do not know what it is. So they actually have to look at the slide to share what it is. But because, again, they are busy with all that stuff, right? So we had an experience where we had a customer from DHL who's a regular to our presentation. So he said like, okay, I've seen this slide, move. So like, okay, fine, tell me what is new. He was like, he didn't know what to say because he has not seen the slide before. And it related to exactly what you said, right? If you do not know what the slides contain, when such bouncers happen, you are totally caught unaware.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my VP was like, he was trying to look at, hey, tell me what's new in the slide. He was like trying to see, and then I had to jump in because I was able to prepare the deck and I was able to say what from last time we had done these things. So I think what you said makes a lot of sense. Right? People make that mistake saying like, I can get away because I've been in that position. I can just come and just walk through the slide because I've seen this deck a number of times.
Yeah. True. I agree completely. And by the way, the incident I talked about of a client listening to Wipro and Infi and then coming to us and doing this is a real life incident. It was ING from Europe which did that to me. And what happened was that luckily ING was going to come to us for the first time. So what I had done was that I had looked at a website where ING customers go and either say good things about their products or bad things about their products. And we had downloaded the entire blog which showed good things and bad things. And then in Cognizant, we had something called as a sentiment analyzer. So we pushed this thing through that, and the analyzer came back and said, these are the good things people say about ING, and these are the bad things they say about ING. So when this guy said to me, he said, so tell me how your company is different. I just gave him one page of output saying, this is what your customers say about you, good and bad. And to this, it basically comes up with that Google Cloud thing, right? So good things, bad things, different colors, red and blue or red and green. And the more they say it, the cloud becomes bigger, something like that. Yeah, I had one page of output. And we sat around the table and I gave him that. And I said, has any other company shown you this? He said, yeah, but which company is this for? I said, this is ING. This is what people are talking about you. That's it. That's all that is required to sell. And we got them as our customer. Because that is where you come up with your differentiator. Okay? Everybody has same skills, same things. Yeah, cost here and there different. Only those who are able to tell these stories in an effective manner make that sale. That's what my thinking. My biggest problem in Cognizant was that I was in a technology company selling business consulting. Where I was heading that group of business consultants. Imagine, first question the guy is going to say is, why for business consulting? Why should I come to you? Why wouldn't I go to McKinsey, Accenture, EY. Why should I come to Cognizant? And then I would say, okay, so we had one presentation that we made in UK, London, around 2006-7, about some regulation and how it was impacting things. And the guy who spoke before me was an industry veteran of that particular area. So we were not sure whether people will be even interested in listening to us after he has spoken. Surprisingly, there was no room to even stand in that hall when we gave the presentation. At the end of that presentation, a guy sitting there right in front, a Great Swiss guy, comes and says to a Cognizant guy saying, "Can you guys come and meet me on Monday?" He said, "Why?" He said, "I have Accenture running my project, but I don't think they can cross all the T's and dot all the I's the way you guys showed us that you can do in a 1 hour presentation." He said, "Come meet me." I think we did maximum business with Credit Suisse, IB side after that point. Till then, we never had Credit Suisse IB as our customer. Just by that one presentation, we got everything from